Some people have control over their emotions. I don't. I was trying to find any way to escape. I want the story out there. Like, what happened? Go frame by frame.
That was a clip from the new 5-part Netflix docuseries Untold, which brings fresh eyes to various epic tales from sports. One of those tales is the infamous Malice at the Palace, a night that no one could forget, when a melee between the Pistons and the Pacers spilled into the stands. One of the players at the center of the brawl was Pacers forward Jermaine O'Neal. Is featured centrally in the episode. He talks in detail about that night in episode 1 and joins us now. Jermaine O'Neal, welcome to Takeline.
Thanks for having me.
Jermaine, one of the episode closes with Steven Jackson, yourself, saying, "Man, I don't want to talk about this anymore. I'm done talking about this." So thank you for talking about it one more time. Did you sense? Obviously, at that time, the Pacers and the Pistons were big-time rivals. But was there a point before before everything kind of occurred where you sensed that the atmosphere was just a little bit different?
Well, honestly, back then, everything was super intense. Like, rivalries were real. Friendships were put aside. That's one thing people don't realize. Like, half of us on the Pistons and the Pacers actually were friends, right? And so, but you couldn't tell because it didn't matter, right? We had a job to do. We had a job description that we had to fulfill on every single night. And we knew that we were in each other's way to get to the ultimate goal. And that was, that was something that fed into, cities, right? They came to Indianapolis and it was a hard place for them to play. Being in Detroit was a hard place for us to play.
Yeah, it's interesting because I have so many questions. As you know, I'm an athlete, and I feel like if I saw one of my teammates run into the stands, Malice in the Palace. So what was your thoughts when you saw Metta run into the stands? Like, what's the first thought that went into your head?
Well, let me say this first. One of the things, because that's a very good question. I gotta say thank you to Netflix for allowing this vision to be a part of an incredible series of docs. The Way brothers, Floyd Rust, the director. I've been trying to do this for 10 years, and I wanted to tell a story, not to the avid basketball fan, but to the person that I'm actually seeing in boardrooms and business deals that are asking me about this, but are not NBA fans, right? Yeah. And so, it was important for me to be able to tell a story that came from, the people's mouth that was involved. And it was difficult to get everybody there that we've got in this doc, but it was something that was important to me because we took a lot of heat from that, right? And I'm get to your question, but it was important too because it became a cultural issue. If you hit a doc, like, people are really, really saying crazy things. Some of the most respected people in media that I respect, were just taking jabs and wasn't doing the very thing that put them in that position, and that was getting information. Real information, right? It was a quick to judgment scenario. And to a point, it, allowed people to take jabs at us, talk about hip hop, talk about braids, talk about tattoos. And that was a problem for me. But I had to make sure I said that because that sits close to my heart because we're still living it 17 years later, as people asking about this stuff all the time and it's anniversaries for whatever reason. And I'm like, man, let's create a doc, tell the story, and then we can move on with our lives. But back to watching Ron, first of all, I couldn't. It was a situation where you saw it coming, right? And the reason why I said we had just beat the hell out of the Pistons on national television, we knew that was our year, right? We knew we were better than those guys, they'd had a phenomenal, team, and they had a lot of, just coming off a championship. So they had that pedigree. So we knew it was going to be difficult, but we knew it was our time. So when Ben started throwing all of the armbands, already in a tough environment, right, in Detroit, right, tough environment, we started seeing people get riled up. So we're standing there, we're looking around, and then you see little things starting to be thrown, right? So that's another thing people didn't talk about, right? It's like little things start to be thrown because if we are out and our energy is running to the crowd and we're like this and, telling them to yell and scream, the fans typically do what we ask them to do, right? And so they were mimicking what Ben was doing. And, he threw it, he kept throwing the armbands. And this guy, I don't like to really say his name too much because he still has a special place, in my dislike part of my life.
To this day?
Well, I don't think he's regretful for what he did, right? And so I think we're all a little bit more mature. But he was, instead of being really an ass about it, he probably should have been in some sort of sport because his aim was impeccable. For him to even hit him with that cup.
It was. I mean, it was. Like, none of the liquid came out of the cup until it hit him. Like, it was incredible. It was uncanny the way that cup came down.
He definitely chose, his decision on occupation was definitely off. Because he had, and I think now, honestly, knowing what I know about Ron and how he handled pressure, right? And I think it's important for you guys to know, when we did this doc, we didn't record it together. So we did it all separately, right? And so the first time I saw what he said was when they gave me the first, rough cut of it. And I never knew how he handled pressure. Like, I'd never heard him talk about that, right? Because mental health back then wasn't a real thing. It was like the death of a career if people thought that you were crazy. Right. And so to hear him talk about the 5 count, right, and how he dealt with that it all made sense to me. Versus now when you're thinking about him running in the stands, he was already to a point of erupting, literally. And so watching him run into the stands kind of threw me for a loop. But watching everybody else run towards us is what really got me going.
You mentioned the way some of the most respected figures in news media really were talking about this incident, from Bob Costas to everybody on CNN on down. There was I'll never forget the weeks following this, but that moment played into a very specific, irrational fear in this country of black violence against white people, and it just snowballed to the point where people were calling you thugs. Bob Costas was calling you thugs. And it seemed like, and you mentioned this in the doc, that like there was no platform, no way for y'all to put out your perspective, to say this is what happened to us. This is what we were seeing. Like, look, go through it and see it from our perspective. There was no opportunity to do that. And in fact, in the wake of that, the NBA and David Stern put in the dress code rules, which seemed directly aimed at tamping down this kind of perception of the league as too black, too influenced by hip hop, etc. What were those days like where you just couldn't, I'm sure you had a lot of people advising you at that time. Were they telling you just don't say anything at that time? And what would you like to say now about what was said during those weeks?
Well, one, we couldn't, right? I think the thing that people don't realize, everything from, this whole process went on 7 to 10 years. Like, literally, like the final thing on this happened 10 years later, right? And so, we basically had a muzzle on us because we had not only all the criminal stuff that we had to go through, which took a long time, but we had civil, and civil was the killer, right? Because now people are suing you. So you have to be careful in what you say and go through this process. And at the same time, while a narrative is being created on you, that isn't really the truth, right? Everything, all the clips of the punching, right? You see all of that, but you don't see the guy grabbing me around my neck. Like, literally, before you saw me slide over there for the punch, I had just got a guy that went up behind my neck and grabbed me, and I throw him on the table. I look to my left and I see Anthony Johnson. So if you go back and look at the clip, you see Anthony Johnson in a brown suit, who's my teammate, had a broken hand. He's on the floor. The Haddad dude is actually standing over him. Wow. Right. And so I run over there and I hit him. Right. And at that point, it's about leadership. right? In a situation where you can't even believe that, wait, you got on an NBA jersey and now you're in here fighting for your life because they've blocked all of the exits and there's not a police in the building, right? So, it's one of those things that was tough for me, honestly, because it opened not only me, Steve, and Ron up for criticism, but the league that I care about so much, right? That gave me an opportunity to live a dream. The Pacers, right? Gave me an opportunity to be the player that I was. Obviously Portland drafted me, but Pacers gave me an opportunity to create a footprint. And I'm just watching people just culturally just gut us. And we're being told you cannot say anything, right? And so, this narrative, it was almost like it became a part of our body armor, right? Now we're wearing this thing every day, year over year over year over year, and it's becoming a real conversation that, to be quite honest, shouldn't have been. Now, I did understand that the league has a bottom line number that they have to get to. I understood that, right? I understood it was a penalty to pay for anything, but to the level that we had to pay, or at least from my perspective, had to pay, I was not okay with that, especially when I took the NBA to court and won. People don't know about that.
Did people issue an apology? Did you ever receive any apologies, basically, after you had won?
I did not. And I understood why. Because it's a business. And again, the NBA is a special place. It's a very special place. And I don't, even to this point today, I don't feel like I need an apology because I understand it. I have the right now to right the wrongs by putting the doc out. And that's kind of my, okay, here you go. And then if you choose to come to a conclusion now, at least you have the real information.
No, I like that. And something else that kind of gets lost in the story is that the season ended up being Reggie Miller's last season. And you especially had been vocal about winning a championship in Indiana. So as you reflect on this, what are your thoughts about Reggie and yourself not being able to get that ring?
Special. Reggie's always been special to me. To know how sports work, to know how players work, every player that's on the team ain't really for everybody, right? And, in a situation where Reggie was coming to the end of his career and just coming off of it, basically 3 years before that off of NBA Finals and allow me to come in as a basically unproven player, he could have easily said, nah, if you bring him in, trade me. But he didn't, right? And he had a conversation with me and said, I'm going to let you be whatever you want to be as long as you work for it. And that meant the world to me. And to be put in that situation, it was so bad. And I guarantee if you ask Reggie probably had 2 more years to play. Like literally, like 2 more really good years to play. But how everything was being dissected. And when I tell you, we lived this, right, in our own cities. And everything becoming more race than actual facts, right? That was a problem. And I don't think Reggie wanted to, well, matter of fact, I know Reggie didn't want to have to deal with those questions and that level of attention that has now become negative attention. And it's not even about the game anymore.
Untold premieres on Netflix on August 10th. The first episode is Malice in the Palace. Jermaine, thank you for talking to us today.
Thanks for having me.